How's it going, Twitch? My name is Skull, and on behalf of EastasiaSoft, welcome to today's stream. Today, I am taking a look at Venus, Improbable Dream, which I have absolutely no idea what this is. Apparently, it's a visual novel, so let's go ahead and hop into it, see what kind of awesome game awaits us. As usual, I'm going into this completely blind, no idea what to expect. Which probably means I'm going to have to adjust the volume on the fly, as usual. Ooh, Borealis, really? I feel like I've played some of their games before. Got a treble clef. I am a musician, I know what that is. Yeah, that's a volume change. Not a big one, though. Let's go ahead and check our settings. Yep, that's a VN, all right. Let's go ahead and start. Probably means I'll have to move my webcam up here. Hi, Panda P, how are you doing? Case study. Oh my lord. Hema G something. Hemangioma. That's what my parents told me it was called. Hey, we got a trophy! Oh boy. Hey, I'm literally the first person to ever get that trophy. Let's go. Okay. A growth of extra blood vessels clumped together to form a tumor. Oh, that's sad. No one knows why it happens. Some people are just unlucky, I guess. Mine started appearing a few weeks after I was born. A slight discoloration of skin, barely noticeable at first, that slowly began to take over my face, little by little. They start off flat and grow bigger and bigger with time. After a point, they reach their limit and begin to shrink, eventually disappearing altogether. Most children who have hemangiomas lose them by the time they're 10. I didn't. Around the time I started junior high, the doctor started giving me all sorts of medication in order to get it to recede, but there were limited results. The main swollen bulge of the tumor shrank, for the most part, but other than that, nothing changed. I'm still left with a huge dark red patch of rough, rubbery skin on my face. I hate it. Surgery was discussed at one point, but considering how close to my eye this thing is, it would be risky. My parents decided against it. They said that I didn't need it, that I could still live a perfectly happy life the way things were, and that was that. Hemangioma and tumor sound like scary words, but in fact, hemangiomas are almost always harmless, so they're not scary at all. Well, not to everyone else. They still are to me. Not because of what mine could do to me, but for what it does to other people. I can't even begin to recall the amount of times a stranger has gawked at me on the street, or shuddered in repulsion at the sight of my face. The worst part is, I don't blame them. After a while, I began to feel like I deserved every mean comment, every snarky remark, and every playtime left alone, while everyone else had fun together. They were right. I'm ugly. Every time I see it, touch it, or remember that it's there, I just want it to die. My parents used to tell me that it didn't matter what I looked like, that the people who were rude about it were the problem, not me. They'd always insist that I'd grow up just the same as everyone else. But how can I hold a conversation with somebody with them staring at the monstrosity on my face? I figured out pretty quickly that there was no point in trying to be normal. Someone like me could never fit in with any group of friends. They'd only keep me around so that I could be the butt of everyone's jokes. I started doing everything I could not to be noticed. I put the absolute minimum effort into everything. I taught myself to be invisible. Yes, I felt lonely and isolated, but it was better than being picked on. That's just the way I have to live my life now. I might be 17 and almost ready to face the real world, but as long as I have this hemangioma, I'll never be able to face anything. Not even my own face. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. Just another day. The other students around me are sharing whispered chatter, as usual. I sit right at the back of the room so I can see everybody else in the class. More importantly, they can't see me. It's one of my safety barriers. You tend to make a lot of them when you have a problem like I do. Glancing back at my workbook, I let my eyes comb over the questions again. I've answered them all, but the incessant scratching of pens on paper tells me that everyone else is still working. It usually plays out this way. I've never exactly been smart, but with nobody to talk to, I just put my head into my schoolwork. Thanks to this, I've never had any issues with low grades. The last thing I'd want is to be called out for not putting in enough effort. Wouldn't really help with the whole not being noticed thing. With nothing else to do, I let my gaze move to the view out of the windows to my left. It's early June. School in June, my condolences. So rainy season's probably going to hit us soon. The sky isn't exactly cheerful, turning more and more gray by the day. But at least it's warm. Don't forget to read through pages 198 through 204 before the next class. Matsumoto Sensei's voice is so loud in comparison to the hush of the room, I almost flinch. His instruction must mean that the bell is about to ring for lunch. Looking up at the clock on the wall confirms it. Quietly, I start to pack my things away. My classmates aren't in the same hurry, as they tend to linger for a while, gossiping and doing whatever it is that friends do before heading to the cafeteria. You wouldn't catch me doing either of those things. I have my own little ritual that I do every day. After finding a secluded spot, not long after I first came to this school, I've always eaten there alone, away from prying eyes. It's more comfortable that way. Thinking about it makes me even more anxious to get there and enjoy at least an hour of peace before I have to come back to another room full of people. Remember, it's Wednesday, so you've got your science quiz coming up after lunch. The classroom erupts in a collective groan. I think I'm the only person who doesn't object. Hoisting my bag onto my shoulder and leaning forwards in my seat, I find myself staring at the clock, watching the second hand tick by, waiting for the first acceptable moment to leave the room. The wait feels impossibly drawn out, but eventually the hands synchronize on the hour. The bell rings out shrilly in the corridor, acting like the starting gun of a race. I stand up from my seat before anyone else does, turning towards the door, grateful to escape the discomfort of the crowded room. However, just as I'm taking my first step, another sound echoes across the classroom, coming from the opposite direction. Akane! My entire body freezes in place. The teacher never calls on me. I'm the unremarkable kid who gets decent grades and never says a word. What does he want with me? I struggle to twist my rigid limbs back towards the front of the classroom, highly aware of many students glancing at me as I do. This is exactly the kind of thing I hate. There's nothing in the world that I want to do more than just run out of the room, but I guess I can't. Fixing my eyes on the floor in a desperate attempt to ignore everybody's gazes, I force myself to walk up to Matsumoto Sensei's desk. To be honest, I'm surprised that he called on me like that in front of everyone. He's the one who let me sit behind the rest of the class, and who never makes me answer a question or read a passage from a textbook. He knows what I'm like. My anxiety has always been something that was just accepted since I came to this school. I think as long as my work is good, they'll let it slide. As I reach my desk, I take a lightning-fast glance backwards at everybody. The noise level in the room has gone up considerably. Friends starting to gather in groups and talk amongst themselves, and others are leaving the room to get lunch. It gives me the slightest bit of relief to know that I'm no longer the center of most people's attention. Still uncomfortable, I meet Matsumoto-sensei's eyes briefly to let him know that I'm ready to listen to whatever it is that he wants to say. Hopefully this will be quick. Akane, I've got a proposition for you. A highly unusual start to a conversation. The school has been in touch with your parents. We're all a little concerned about your progress here. My progress? He can't mean my grades. Your work is quite satisfactory, but there's been talk about your interactions with other students. Or lack of, should I say. His facial expressions grow a bit awkward for a second, before he regains his usual serious gaze. He's probably not used to having to talk about these kinds of things. I thought that my solitary ways had been glossed over in the light of my decent schoolwork, but I guess I couldn't hide my problems forever. I understand that you've had issues. There's no point going into them now. I thanked him silently inside my own head. The other teachers and your parents are worried about your future, Akane. What you'll do once you leave the school. It would be very difficult for someone of your nature to succeed in life. You understand? I know exactly what he's talking about. The thought of graduating and having to find some way of supporting myself, integrating myself into society, getting a job. It's too much to handle. Instead of facing up to it, I simply throw myself into the present moment, living in some sort of fantasy that it'll never get to that point. I know I'm wrong, of course, but it's all I can do to keep myself going for now. I nod tensely as he exhales, seeming to have a lot on his mind. A suggestion has been put forward that may help you with this. Something for you to try out. I don't like where this is going. If my parents think I'm enrolling in some kind of therapy group or getting doped up on anxiety medication. You used to play the piano, didn't you? Huh? What's that got to do with anything? Yes. I mumbled the word quietly, still bemused. Of all the things I was expecting him to say, that wasn't one of them. Your parents tell me you quite enjoyed it as a younger child. Enjoyed is probably too strong a word. I took up the instrument as something to do since I never really had any friends to hang out with. I don't know why I chose the piano. It could have been anything, really. I had private lessons for a while. It was a half-decent way to pass the time, although I never really put my heart and soul into it. After a while, I just lost interest. Besides, it's kind of impossible to practice when you don't have a piano at home. I never really thought about it since, having not played for years. It's just another part of my life that fell by the wayside when I decided to isolate myself from the world as much as I could. I still don't understand why this is relevant to my anxiety. How would you like to try it again? I glance up at him after hearing his question, and he has an unsettling mixture of concern and optimism in his eyes as he searches my face for a reaction. It's been suggested that you join the music club as an after-school activity. I think it's the fear in my eyes that causes him to avert his gaze for a moment. The music club? I've never joined a school club in my life. A room full of people expected to work together in close proximity to make something happen is the complete opposite of what I want. I want everything to stay the way it is. I want to sit at the back of the class and scrape by, unnoticed by everyone else. How on earth could someone like me join a club? Matsumoto-sensei clearly notices my internal panicking and tries to come across more gently as he continues. I understand that this is a difficult concept for you, Akane. The issue is that the longer you remain like this, the harder it will be to break out of it. I know he's right. I just can't stand it. All we'd like you to do is attend one session with the music club to start with. See how you like taking up the piano again. You never know, it might prove to be a good experience. They don't have a pianist as far as I'm aware. They'd probably be very pleased to have you join the group. A disgusting-faced hermit who hasn't practiced his instrument for years and can't hold a conversation with anyone Oh yeah, I'm sure they'd be thrilled to have me. With every second that passes, I plunge further and further into disbelief that this is happening. As calm as Matsumoto Sensei is, I get the feeling that I'm being told to join the music club rather than asked, like it's not an avoidable fate. Your name has been passed on to Kudo, the club's advisor, so he knows you'll be attending. This fact proves my suspicion exactly. Hi, Dem. How are you doing? Yep, daylight savings. If I were you, I'd head over there today after school. The quicker you begin, the quicker you can start to make progress. I'm sure your parents will be very excited to hear how it goes. I'm sure they will. I can't believe they volunteered me for this without asking me. My thoughts threaten to consume me entirely, but I can feel Matsumoto Sensei's eyes boring into my face, waiting for some sort of answer. Oh, I'm doing good, Dem. Yeah, thanks. My skin starts to prickle and my stomach jitters. I want to say no, but considering everything he said, I don't think it's possible. Squeezing my eyes shut and accepting my circumstances grudgingly, I nod my head. I'm not looking at him, but I can feel him relax. Good news! I'll send a message to Kudo. This could be the start of something very beneficial for you. I hear him step aside, collecting his things together at his desk, and I take this as an indication that our conversation is over. Pressing my eyes open again, I almost hope that this has all been a bad dream, that I'll wake up in my bed. Unfortunately, the classroom comes hazily back into view. It's real. A little too overwhelmed to think properly, I coerce my legs to work again, propelling me towards the door. Let's just focus on getting to my safe spot first. Akane! I halt myself again at the sound of my own name being called once more. My nerves somewhat frazzled, I don't turn around, simply waiting for him to speak again. What he says is something I can't bring myself to fathom as a possible reality. No one's going to laugh at you. The hours since Matsumoto Sensei's announcement have passed both agonizingly slowly and far too fast, and I don't think my inner monologue has been this loud inside my own head for a long time. Part of me still doesn't want to believe the truth, but multiple times I've had to force myself to face reality. I've been put forward to try out the music club, regardless of how I feel about it. My parents put me up to this without even saying a word, knowing how horrifying it would be for me. I must really be a disappointment. I don't blame them for wanting a normal child, someone who's outgoing and makes friends easily. It's what every other set of parents has. But they should know by now that it's never going to happen with me. This music club situation is precisely the type of thing I try to avoid. Every time I try to picture the scene, I'm terrified by what I see. A bright room packed with friends who know each other well, all turning to face me in silent horror as I walk in, too afraid to look anybody in the eyes. Though I try to suck it up and just play the piano, I make a complete mess of it, severely out of practice. Everyone gets frustrated. The advisor tells me I'm not good enough. I freak out, trying to endure everyone's stares. Panic attack ensues. Total humiliation. That's what I imagine will happen, and yet I can't bring myself to run away. The expectations of my parents and the teachers keep me chained to my obligation. So I carry on, walking towards the music club room. My legs feel like they're made of lead as I force myself to take step after step. The closer I get to my destination, the further out of my comfort zone I become. The door looms ominously in front of me. Leaning towards it, I listen to the sounds coming from within. Many voices chatter animatedly, though I can't gauge from the noise alone how big the group might be. Several instruments are strummed, plucked, or blown occasionally. It sounds exactly like the kind of place I don't belong. Fear threatens to engulf me for a moment, and I close my eyes, swallowing my nerves as best I can. Just do it, Kakeru. Just get through this one meeting. That's what Matsumoto-sensei has asked of me. Attend one session with the music club to start with. All I have to do is fumble my way through this, however god-awful it may be, and then I can go back to Matsumoto-sensei and tell him it's not for me, and I'll never have to see any of these people again. He can't be mad at me for trying. It's what he'd told me to do. Taking the deepest breath I possibly can, I do everything in my power to steady myself before pushing the door open, slowly. It's loud in here. Though most conversations continue in the wake of my arrival, a few people turn to look at me. I automatically drop my gaze, swiveling slightly so that I almost have my back to them. I could see the club's advisor out of the corner of my eye, sitting to the side of the group. Wanting to get this whole ordeal over with, I start shuffling towards him. He stands up as soon as I begin to move, probably having noticed my clumsy entrance right away. Ah, Akane Kakeru, was it? I nod awkwardly, not quite able to say anything just yet. My nerves need to stop making me feel sick first. Welcome to the music club. You've come to us at a good time, actually. Our last pianist dropped out a few months ago. We've been hoping to find another one, but haven't had any luck until now. I sneak a little glimpse of him. He seems a bit more easygoing than the other teachers, not as well presented as Matsumoto-sensei. His lopsided grin almost makes him relax ever so slightly. Almost makes me relax ever so slightly. I really don't know what the novel is about, but it's about, according to the tweet that Josh put out, about mental health and identity. And so far, it looks like that's pretty accurate. However, I can't help but laugh internally at his enthusiasm. I'm sure he won't be as keen on me once he sees how bad I am at my instrument. He pauses for a moment, seeming to be waiting for me to say something, but I still can't bring myself to open my mouth. I manage the occasional single word to Matsumoto-sensei, having known him for years, but Kudo-sensei is new territory. After a moment, he straightens up, apparently realizing that he's going to have to take the lead. He turns to face the other students, and for a moment, I begin to dread the inevitable class introduction. Everyone will definitely be staring at me then. However, after glancing back at me briefly, he seems to decide against it, seeing how tense I am. My whole body throbs in relief. Alright, everyone, it's time to begin. He claps his hands as he speaks, and the tangle of students take notice immediately, extracting themselves from their friendship groups and taking their places. Everyone seems very obedient, or perhaps they just really enjoy the music club and can't wait to get started. I'm sure my presence has something to do with it. First of all, I'd like you to show our newest recruit what you're capable of. I think we'll have the Bach piece, please. Bach piece, please. Wow, that's hard to say. A few eyes move to land on me briefly, but overall nobody seems to question why I haven't introduced myself to the club. As they shuffle through their sheet music, I find myself praising whatever gods may or may not exist for the fact that no one has tried to talk to me. Kudo-sensei drags an extra seat over from the back of the room, gesturing for me to sit down. Thankfully, it's not too close to the group, so I'll be able to feel somewhat separated from things while I watch them. I take the seat quickly, wanting to get out of the way. After a few moments of preparation, a sudden hush falls over the room. All right, everyone ready? He raises his arms in order to count everybody in, a thin white conductor's baton in his right hand. I'd been so focused on shrinking down into my chair I hadn't even noticed him pick it up. On his signal, the group began to play. The noise fills the room instantly, jarring me a little, but the longer it goes on, the more I'm able to calm myself down. With everyone focused on what they're doing, there's no opportunity for them to look at me. The piece they're playing sounds nice, although I know basically nothing about classical music. Unfortunately, I get the feeling that it's the main focus of this club. With nobody's attention on me, I managed to peek at the students properly for the first time since I entered the room. There were 15 of them in total. 2 clarinet players, 1 oboe player, 2 trumpet players, 1 trombone player, 5 violinists, 2 viola players, and 2 cello players. I don't think a group of this size technically counts as an orchestra, but they still seem to be doing a decent job of playing the piece nonetheless. I play violin, for what it's worth. Have since I was 6 years old. My gaze falling to rest at my feet again, I begin to feel a terrible sense of foreboding. There's no way I can contribute to this. It's obvious that these people have been playing their instruments for quite a while and practice regularly. I actually can't remember exactly how many years it's been since I touched a piano. My eyes drift over to the back of the room where the music club's piano sits, having been temporarily neglected. It's a huge black grand piano. Must have cost a fortune. I slip my hands into my pockets tensely, as if that would prevent me from having to attempt to play the thing. Exhaling slowly and trying to ride out the fresh wave of nerves that courses through me, I sit and listen to the rest of the group performance. Once it's over, Kudo-sensei praises their efforts, giving them some short snippets of feedback. He then gestures towards a couple of the taller boys in the group, asking them to help him move the piano. As they make their way to the back of the room, I feel my stomach begin to sink within me. Can't I just carry on watching? I lean forward in my seat, my hands clenching my pockets tightly. There's nothing in the world that can convince me that whatever is about to happen will be anything short of humiliating. I can't play like these people. That alone is enough to alienate me from them massively, never mind my screwed up face. I hear the quiet squeak of the piano's wheels as it's rolled across the room and into place, and the scuffle of students moving to make space for it. But I can't bring myself to look up. The sound of the instrument itself rings out briefly as someone plays a chord on it, probably to make sure that it's still in tune. "All right, Akane, she's all yours." He shoots the words at me casually, trying to help me feel at ease. My eyes are cast so far down that they're almost closed, but I can still feel the horrible prick of 16 faces all gazing at me simultaneously. Please don't look at me. Please don't make me do this. My heart beats loudly in my head, and I struggle to swallow, my mouth suddenly dry as a bone. Trying to find some sort of focus, I recall what I'd said to myself outside the club room door, which had pushed me to come in here in the first place. I'm only doing this once. Sorry about that. I don't know any of these people. It's not like I'll be stuck in class with them for the rest of our school lives. They won't be there to constantly remind me how badly I messed this up. Come on, Kakeru. Just do this once. Just this once. I force my body to spring up out of the chair before it has a chance to do anything else. The silence is deafening, almost louder than the music they'd been playing a minute ago. I make my way awkwardly to the piano, taking a seat on the stool in front of it. I'd expected to hear whispering, people gossiping about me, trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with me, but the room is completely void of any noise whatsoever. Unsure of whether this is a good thing or not, I do my best to settle into my seat. Being forced by their parents, and I think this is a boy. Now, your homeroom teacher told me you'd had private lessons as a youngster. Have you played the piano at all recently? They're all waiting expectantly. I've got to make some sort of effort. No, not... My words dry up. Luckily, Kudo-sensei just starts talking again, as if I'd said a full sentence. Well, that's alright. None of us were musical prodigies when we started here. A quiet laugh ripples through the room, and though the situation is still excruciating, I appreciate the slight break in the atmosphere it provides. Hey, I said more than one word this time. Just about. Let me grab you some sheet music, and we can see how you get on with it. He half jogs over to a table at the edge of the room, which looks as though it got several stacks of books on it. After finding what he wants, He brings it over to me, placing it on the piano's music stand. There. I've chosen the piece that they played since you've already heard it once. Are you familiar with sight reading? I nod. My old piano tutor always made me practice sight reading at home, so I could at least develop that skill while I was away from the piano. Great! Take a moment to look over it before we play. He nods at the rest of the group, and they take the hint, breaking into quiet conversations in order to give me a chance to familiarize myself with the music. I look up at the pages in front of me, but before I can really absorb anything, Kudo-sensei moves a little closer to me, leaning down slightly. Don't worry, Akane. Everybody has a shaky start. No one's expecting a masterpiece. I glance briefly at him, and he smiles in a relaxed manner before striding away towards the front of the room. He really does seem to be going out of his way to try to put me at ease, although I get the feeling that his casual nature is quite genuine. Pulling my focus back to the task at hand, I look over the sheet music. Thankfully, the various notes, rests, and performance marks running along the staves seem to make sense, a strange nostalgia rushing back to me, although I can't say it's particularly fond. I spend a short while reading the music, mapping out the notes I'll need to play with my fingers, miming the piece over the top of the keys. It's not incredibly difficult, but that doesn't mean I'll be able to play it well. After what feels like only seconds, Kudo-sensei claps his hands again, calling the room back to attention. A massive rush of anxiety charges through my stomach. Alright, I think we're ready to start. Remember to keep firmly to tempo all the way through. We don't want to take Akane on a runaway train ride. Another laugh hits the air, louder this time, and then everyone settles down, readying their instruments. I feel as though my nervous breathing is so loud it's going to put people off. Hovering my shaky hands over the keys, I hope for some sort of miracle to get me through this. Time seems to pause as Kudo-sensei's hands remain fixed in the air, the baton in his grasp once more, and then he moves it fluidly, counting everybody in. Oh God, this is horrible. My eyes jerk erratically between the sheet music and my hands, trying to keep track of everything at once, and my fingers feel so wooden I can't move them properly. Exactly as I'd expected. Just this once. That's what I keep telling myself over and over again as I plank my way through what is possibly the most awkward and unappealing piano performance of all time. It seems to go on forever, and when it finally comes to a close, my whole body crumples in on itself, exhausted despite barely doing anything. I don't even dare to imagine what everybody must be thinking. I simply sit there, eyes on my lap, bracing for impact. When Kudo-sensei speaks again, I almost flinch. Alright, well, a bit shaky, but not bad considering you haven't played in a while. I'm sure once you start practicing again, you'll be back up to speed. That's generous. If the whole room bursts out laughing at what I've done, I wouldn't blame them. Let's give it another run through, shall we? And slow down on that ostinato, would you? He waves a hand towards the oboe and trombone players, grinning. This isn't Flight of the Bumblebee. Several of the other students burst into loud giggles this time, and the oboe player is playfully shoved by the guy next to him. A tiny part of me wants to laugh along with them. The club is a lot more relaxed than I'd initially thought for. However, I'm still completely convinced that this place is not the place for me. We continue to play for a while, practicing the same piece several times. I'm not entirely sure whether I get any better with each run through or not, but at least I'm still breathing and conscious. The situation hasn't exactly gotten any more comfortable though, and in all honesty, I still can't wait to get out of here. As if reading my thoughts, Kudo-sensei announces something I hadn't expected. Alright, we can break now. As though he'd flicked a switch, the noise level in the room goes up dramatically. People begin chatting loudly, moving their music stands and instruments into smaller groups. I'm a little confused. I thought music club went on for 2 hours, but it can't have been that long already. Thankfully, Kudo-sensei appears at my side again to inform me of what's going on. The second half of each club meeting is dedicated to free practice. You can get yourself with a few people and work together, or you can just stick to yourself. It gives everyone a chance to go through their individual parts and get help from others if they need it. It'll be especially beneficial for you, not having a piano at home. I nod, although I feel as though I'm on autopilot somewhat. Even if I'm by myself, I didn't think I'd feel comfortable attempting to resharpen my severely dwindling piano skills in the same room as everyone else. You take your time and get to know that sheet music better. We have plenty of other pieces to play here in the club, but you might as well start here. He heads back to the seat he'd been sitting in when I'd first arrived, picking up some large notebooks. Not used to having to play games where I'm constantly talking all stream long, so sorry if I need to take constant water breaks, guys. Stay hydrated. I don't know about this. I take a discreet glance at the students around me. Some of them have retrieved large acoustic panels from the back of the room, heaving them into place around their little subgroups. It dulls the sound a little, enabling each group to hear themselves better and not bother everyone else as much. But despite this near seclusion, I still don't feel comfortable enough to practice. I have to admit, I'm still shocked that not a single one of the other club members has tried to talk to me this entire time. My own classmates that I see every day are very used to me by now, and even then they sometimes break into whispers and glances at my expense. I'd been expecting the same treatment here, but instead everyone just carries on with things as if I'm not in the room. Perhaps Kudo-sensei specifically instructed them all not to interact with me, after hearing how bad my anxiety is from Matsumoto-sensei. That doesn't make me feel great. A little dejected, I take another quick look around the room to see how many sets of eyes are on me. To my surprise and relief, the answer is 0. Standing up, my legs a little wobbly, I make my way quietly over to the chair I'd been sitting in at the beginning of the club meeting, my bag still discarded next to it. Picking it up and swinging it up onto my shoulders, I cast a cursive glance at Kudo-sensei. He's deeply engrossed in whatever he's doing, twirling a pen absent-mindedly in his hands between scribbles. I should just leave. I've done what I came here to do. I tried it once. Yes, I'd be ducking out early, but I still battled my way through the traumatic ordeal of forcing myself to play alongside the group. They can't ask any more than that. I take a breath, steeling myself for potential questioning when I... Sorry. My eyes just stop looking at the text. I take a breath, steeling myself for potential questioning when I go to the... I take a breath, steeling myself for potential questioning when I go to exit the room. However, as I'm standing quietly, gearing myself up, my ears pick up on a new sound, something completely separate from the noise of the club members practicing and talking. Something coming from the opposite direction. Sounds like a flute. A flute? I didn't notice any flute players in the group before. In fact, it can't be a club member. They're all here in this room with me. So what is it? Oddly curious and also eager to remove myself from the cacophony of noise, I begin to cautiously follow the sound. Feeling self-conscious, I eye Kudo-sensei as I move towards the other side of the room, but he still doesn't notice me, busy with his notebooks. Leaving the throng of the main room behind, I find myself edging slowly down a corridor that I hadn't realized was here before. Peering down it, I catch the side of a door on the left-hand side. I'd guess that it's a store cupboard, but the more I shuffle towards it, the louder the sound of the flute becomes. Has someone left a CD playing or something? Putting my ear up to the door's cool surface, it becomes clear that the sound is definitely coming from inside. I feel a little nervous about entering whatever room this is, but at the same time, I already know that everybody in the club is currently in the main room, so there can't be anybody in here. It makes the strange turn of events all the more intriguing. I took hold of the door handle delicately, glancing back down the corridor for a moment in case someone has noticed that I'm missing and has come looking for me. I'm still alone. Facing forward again, I press the handle down, pushing the door open gently. I hadn't prepared for the sight on the other side. Oh. At the sight of another person, my body immediately tenses up, my eyes widening in shock. But after a moment of standing there, it appears as though the girl hasn't realized that I'm here. Her back turned to me, she continues to play, the breathy hum of the flute echoing across the room, much louder now that I'm in here with it. What's she doing here? I thought I'd met all the club members. They do everything as a group. Even I wasn't allowed to sit it out, and I'm not even an official member. What makes her different? Bemused and a little rattled, I think about backing out of the room slowly. If I can close the door quietly enough, she might not know that I was ever here. However, the longer I stand there awkwardly in the doorway, the more the soothing sound of her flute fills my head. It's quite nice. Despite my intent to leave, my legs won't seem to move, so against my better judgment, I hover in place. The girl looks almost serene as she plays, her lips pursed in well-practiced poise as she gently blows across the flute's mouthpiece. Perhaps it's just the piece she's playing, but I start to feel a subtle hint of something other than fear, although I can't identify it. Drinking in the peaceful scene, I shift my weight to the opposite foot, having relaxed ever so slightly. This proves to be a mistake. Crap. I leaned against the door too hard and it creaked audibly. The girl gasps quietly as she hears the sound, her head whipping around to look at me. I automatically snap my face away, the rest of my body freshly frozen in alarm. My heart begins to hammer within my chest. Sorry. I manage to spit the word out, but there's no response. Daring myself to look back as quickly as I can, I glance at her. Her expression is panicked as she stares hard at me, seeming thoroughly disturbed, and I instantly know that it's my face that's startling her. I have to get out of here. Pulling myself together, I stagger backwards into the hallway, the motion of which causes the door to close loudly. Feeling ragged and a little upset, I turn to flee the scene, trying to gather myself and walk as calmly as possible. What was I thinking? The sight of that girl's terrified eyes as she looked at me stays burned into my memory. I must have repulsed her. A horrible clenching in my chest. I rejoin the main club room, peeking around the corner to see if the coast is clear. Everything is exactly as I'd left it. The other club members are locked in their many practice groups, and Kudo-sensei still has his nose in his work. Bracing myself and hoping not to give anyone else a reason to look at me, I begin my escape, crossing the room as subtly as I can. Thanks to all the noise, coupled with my well-honed skills of near invisibility, I make it to the other side without anybody calling out to me. Pulling the door open, I feel a great surge of relief wash over my entire body as I step through it, the tension I've been holding all this time rushing out of me. Man, talking this long is actually not easy. Might have to get some more water here soon. Free once more. There's only one thought running through my head after all that unfamiliarity and fear. I really don't ever want to go back there again. Home at last. After the day I've had, even the sight of the lounge, which I don't really spend any time in, is welcoming. I stride across the room towards the stairs, but am distracted halfway by something moving in the corner of my vision. Kakeru! She startles me slightly as she steps towards me. I come to a halt, noticing that Dad is behind her, standing up from the couch. How's your day? Did you go to the music club? I should have guessed. Having put me up to the whole club thing, somewhat forcefully, I might add, they must be dying to know how it went. It's a shame that I'm going to have to disappoint them. Yeah, I can't muster any more than that. I still feel a bit betrayed that they would essentially volunteer me to do something they knew I would hate. My eyes are fixed on the carpet, but I can tell that my mother is excited by my response. That's great! How did it go? I go to say something, but can't seem to prise my mouth open. It's like this even with my parents. We used to be closer, but after I started withdrawing from everybody, I guess I walled myself off from them too. I don't think it was entirely intentional, but once you start seeing other people as something to be avoided, you kind of just go all the way with it. I feel myself start to squirm slightly under their combined gazes. Used to my long silences by now, they wait patiently for me to answer. I didn't like it. That's my eloquent summary of the whole thing. The only way I can squash my feelings about an unsettling experience of the music club into one inadequate sentence. Though I still don't look at my parents, I can practically feel their disappointment from here, although I'm guessing that they might have seen this coming. Well, you tried it, son, and that's the important thing. I do like that about Dad. He doesn't push things as much as Mom does. Not that she's aggressive or anything, but out of the two of them, I can say with near certainty that this whole music club thing would have been her idea. Every now and then, she tries to nudge me gently towards something new, in the hope that it would coax me out of my shell. I can see where she's coming from, but what she doesn't realize is that this shell is impenetrable by now, strengthened through years of purposeful exile. It might be the most impressive creation of my life. It's not coming off. Even still, it seems as though she maintains a little spark of hope that things will change. It was brave of you to do that, Kakeru. I'm sure you could do it again. I steal a quick glance at her. She's regarding me with an optimistic expression, and I don't like it. I bet it was nice playing the piano again after all these years. Matsumoto-sensei told me that the club's advisor is a great teacher. He could probably help you play even better than you used to. Yeah, he probably could, if I was interested. I exhale deeply, knowing exactly what Mom is trying to hint at. She wants me to keep going, become a proper club member, and take it up permanently. I sense both of my parents fidgeting, and the air in the room is getting more and more tense. I need to end this conversation. Before I can pull a sentence together, Dad beats me to it. If you don't want to, it's not the end of the world, but a second try might be easier than the first. He says it as though presenting a fact rather than attempting to pressure me into it. Mom nods her head enthusiastically. Definitely. I'm sure once you get used to it, you'll really enjoy it. I doubt it. My legs almost start walking on their own, in my desperation to get away from this uncomfortable subject. I've had enough stress today. I don't want any more. Maybe. I leave them with that single unconvincing word, shuffling away slowly towards the stairs. Getting the message that I don't want to talk about it anymore, they let me go, nodding and returning to the couch. It doesn't take me long to climb the staircase, though my escape is accompanied by the same guilt that always arises after I've cut my conversations with my parents short. They don't speak much at all nowadays. They talk about how they had it. The talk we just had is the longest one I can remember for God knows how long. It makes me feel even more disappointing as a son. And yet, I can't change my ways. The TV screen flickers in a stream of flashing colors again as I beat the level. Video games are pretty much the only thing I do in my spare time. Having finished my homework, I'd started playing straight away, glad to be able to unwind after such a mentally demanding day. I have to admit, though, I still feel a little unsettled, and I know exactly what's causing it. The music club. My parents want me to make friends again so badly. Do I want the same thing? Casting my mind back in time, I recall being very small, standing on the edge of the playground, feeling too shy to try and join in with everybody's ball games and social cliques. Back then, I would spend time with the other quiet kids. We'd sit off to the side somewhere, playing handheld games consoles and talking about our favorite cartoons. I suppose that was friendship. We didn't have sleepovers at each other's houses, and we didn't run around in the streets after school, playing tag or whatever. I was never close with anyone, but our little break time get-togethers still counted for something. I think my frail sense of optimism was still intact then. I don't remember being too worried about things, assuming that I'd end up with proper friends once I started high school. If anything, the opposite happened. Encouraged by my parents, I'd naively go up to people, introducing myself and trying to join in with their conversations. I figured that some people would be rude about my appearance, as that's just the unfortunate nature of life, but I wasn't expecting people's discomfort around me to be on such a large scale. The amount of bullies increased hugely, and those that were left didn't really know how to handle me. It seemed as though anyone who was nice to me got tainted with the freak label and teased via association. This meant that most people tended to avoid me like the plague, looking alarmed when I spoke to them and checking over their shoulders in case anyone saw us together. After a while, it became obvious to me that making friends was something I was no longer entitled to, along with a happy school life. I noticed that my parents were becoming more and more sad too. Every time I came home with a new bruise or crying because of somebody's cutting words, their faces would darken. It was then that I realized I needed to remove myself from the public eye as much as possible. If I was never around for people to bully, never gave friendlier people a chance to reject me, then life would be easier. My parents wouldn't have to witness failure after failure. I'd just cease to exist in the eyes of my fellow students. So that's what I tried to do, and for the most part, I succeeded. I became a background character in the narrative of my own story, and sorry guys, I really need more water. I'll be right back. Okay, more water. And continue with the sad story. A pointless existence. Pointless, but quiet. It's the best thing I could do. Ooh, another trophy. Nice. It's the best I can do. I might graduate next year, but that doesn't mean that anything will change for me. I'll be the outcast no matter where I go, and there's no point denying it. That's why I can't join the music club. Sitting here, zoning out with my controller hanging loosely in my hand, I accept that as the truth. Besides, the way that girl had looked at me was awful. Her horror at my disfigurement had been clear as day, and her eyes are now permanently etched into my brain. Retrieving my consciousness from the realms of deep thought, I fix my gaze on the TV screen again, starting a new level. I have no choice but to say no. Man, I've been playing for an hour already. That's crazy. That's disappointing to hear, Akane. Disappointing. A word that seems to be synonymous with anything I do. It's Thursday, and Matsumoto-sensei has collared me before lunch again to ask how the music club meeting went yesterday. I'm doing my best to tell him that I don't want to be a part of it. Was Kudo not appreciative of your piano playing? No, he was nice. 4 words this time. Somebody shut me up. I'd meant them too. Kudo-sensei had been considerate about my issues when integrating me into the music club. That wasn't the problem. Well, in that case, I don't see why another trial should be too difficult. Breaking the ice is the most troublesome part of starting a new endeavor like this, and you've already done it. Though his speech and body language are as stiff and professional as ever, I get the feeling that he's trying to encourage me. What do you say, Akane? Would you give it another shot? I'm being ordered around in disguise again, aren't I? I really don't want to agree, but though I want to give him some sort of answer, I find myself stuck, unable to formulate a response. Matsumoto-sensei seems to sense this. Well, you have the rest of the day to think it over. If I were you, I'd make the most of the opportunity. You might enjoy yourself once you settle down. He nods awkwardly, seeming to want to express some kind of reassurance towards me, though he is not very eloquent at it. I don't think a hug is in his physical vocabulary. Not that I'd want one. I bow slightly in response, the end of our conversation reminding me urgently of my number one objective: get away from everybody. Time for lunch. I've made a decision. Lunchtime has given me some time to ponder Matsumoto-sensei's words, and I realize two things. One, I still don't want to be in a music club. Two, it would be rude for me to just disappear without talking to Kudo-sensei first. Even if he hadn't noticed me slinking out of the room early, he would have realized by the end of the club meeting that I was no longer there. I feel a pang of guilt knowing how spineless that was. Not that I could help it, I had to get out. But Kudo-sensei still deserves an explanation. I might be Mr. Invisible, but I still have enough of a conscience to realize that if I'm not going to join his club, I should tell him in person. I'm not exactly thrilled about it, but if it'll get this thing over and done with, then I'll do it. Then I never have to go back there again. That's the thought that fills my head as I pack my things away, conscious that the last class of the day is about to be over. Donning my backpack, I wait impatiently for the bell, as always. As soon as it rings, I dart towards the door, exiting into the corridor before anyone else has fully left their seat. Empty hallways. That's how I like it. I stride purposefully towards the music club room, despite my fluttering nerves. I just want to put an end to this and have things to go back to the way they were. Hope things go back to the way they were before. My legs, trained by now to carry me as swiftly as possible, get me to the club room in no time. I'm not even sure Kudo-sensei will be here yet. After hesitating for a moment, I swallow my fear and push on the door. I'm lucky. Akane! You almost beat me here! He regards me with a casual smile. He really is the polar opposite of Matsumoto-sensei. The fact that only the two of us are currently in the room gives me the opportunity I need to talk to him. It'll be much better with less people around. Sensei. Damn it, just spit it out, Kakaru. It's not that hard. Sorry for yesterday. His expression changes a little once I say this. Ah yes, I wondered where you'd gone for a moment. Cringe. Sorry, Sensei, I can't help being a coward. She didn't scare you too much, did she? She? The girl in the back room? How does he know about that? I saw that you explored the other room. I probably should have warned you about her. So he noticed me creeping around after all. He doesn't seem mad though. If anything, he looks a little apologetic. I was in two minds as to whether to introduce you or not. It could have been easier to go down that route. He seems to muse this aloud to himself as opposed to telling it to me. However, he pulls himself together quickly. Fujiwara Haruka is something of a special case. She hasn't joined the group sessions, but she practices the flute by herself. That's not really in the rules of the club, but... His mouth twists into a pitiful frown. We gave her a benefit of the doubt, being disabled and all. This new information takes me by surprise. I hadn't noticed anything unusual about the girl, although I suppose I didn't look properly. I was more occupied with her flute playing and being terrified. Kudo-sensei almost looks amused for a second. I bet you gave her a little bit of a shock barging in there. She tends to get flustered around new people. That part of his sentence I can empathize with wholeheartedly, but it's the last part that throws me for a loop. Considering that she's blind. Blind? I hear the door open behind me as a gaggle of club members enter noisily. It startles me, but at the same time, the impact is dampened slightly by my state of contemplation. That girl, who'd stared at me as though she'd seen the devil incarnate, was blind? It really takes me a moment to wrap my head around what Kudo-sensei has told me. As if knowing exactly what I'm thinking, he moves his attention away from me momentarily, greeting the other students arriving. She really hadn't seen me at all? The thought is strangely jarring, as her horrified expression had seemed to suggest that she was perfectly capable of seeing the monstrosity that had been in front of her. However, the more I think about it, the more I correlate it to my own feelings. I can't stand meeting new people. I just panic. It must have been scary for her to have somebody burst into the room and then realize that she didn't know the person after hearing them speak. I must have really spooked her. I almost laugh aloud at the idea that I could scare someone more than they could scare me. Miracles are possible after all. Before I can continue down this path of thought, Kudo-sensei speaks again, rousing me back to the room. Anyway, that's that. I'm sure there's no real harm done. He peers across the room, counting the heads of the students present, and as I take a quick glance around, I almost jump at the sight of them all. Geez, the room filled up fast. Seemingly satisfied, Kudo-sensei turned back to me with a smile. Right, seeing as everyone's just about here, let's all get started, shall we? For God's sake. I got so wrapped up thinking about what he told me that I hadn't even had the chance to tell him I didn't want to be in the music club. For a second I considered going ahead with my bad news, but seeing Kudo-sensei's encouraging expression, coupled with how awkward I feel standing at the front instead of sitting at the piano, I grudgingly relent. Alright, I'll try it one more time. I nod briefly, swiveling to make my way skittishly across the room and avoiding eye contact with everybody around me. I can't say that taking up the piano stool feels any more comfortable than it had yesterday, but I sit down anyway. Sighing quietly, I resign myself to another 2 hours of torture. So sorry, guys. Alright, that's free practice, everyone. Be sure to work on your timekeeping, as always. Chatter breaks out in the room, and a flurry of movement erupts as people splinter off into their usual practice groups. Not a part of any of them, I continue to sit despondently at the piano. It had been basically the same as yesterday. I'd struggled to stumble my way through the piece, and hadn't displayed a shred of improvement. Now I understand why this free practice period is so important. It gives people a chance to go through their individual parts at length, rehearsing as much as they need to in order to keep getting better at their instrument. For someone like me, who doesn't have access to a piano outside of this club, it's invaluable. I'm still not wanting to come back for another club meeting, but for the remainder of this one, I might as well at least look like I'm trying to practice. Placing my hands back onto the keys, I read the sheet music again, trying to get my playing more fluid. However, it's proving to be difficult, not only because I'm still incredibly self-conscious about practicing in a room full of musicians that are better than me, but also because I can't get something out of my head. That girl. I really didn't see any of the information that Kudo-sensei told me coming. Not only is it surprising to learn about her disability, but I also feel terrible for essentially terrifying a poor blind girl with my clumsiness. I'm such an idiot. Trying to shake it off, I continue to paw at the piano distractedly until footsteps tell me that Kudo-sensei is approaching. tough, isn't it, Akane? Getting to know a new piece. I nod, my gaze at his feet rather than his face. You can always ask any of the other club members for help. They don't bite. Well, I haven't been bitten yet anyway. He grins at his own joke and I almost join in. Although... He looks thoughtful for a second and I can't figure out what he's contemplating. Thankfully, I don't have to wait long to find out. Go and introduce yourself to Fujiwara. He seems serious about it, and I'm taken aback by the sudden suggestion. I know that being in a big room like this is probably a bit uncomfortable for you. Fujiwara is the same. Have a chat with her. I bet you two have a lot in common. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. Other than the anxiety around people, I don't think I can relate much to a blind girl who somehow plays the flute even more effectively than I can play hide and seek from the rest of the world. And I'm damn good at that. Nevertheless, Kudo-sensei continues to push the point. I don't mind if you take things slowly, Akane. Practice is important, but you need to familiarize yourself with things first. If talking to someone you might feel more comfortable around first will help to put you more at ease here, then go for it. He's a nice guy. Perhaps it's the musician in him. He's more in touch with emotions and deep concepts and all that stuff artsy people are supposed to be good at. At first, I'm not sure what to say to his suggestion, but as the unsettling image of the girl's scared expression comes up in my mind again, I realize that I should at least say sorry for doing that to her. My second apology of the day. I'm doing a great job. Cautiously, I nod at Kudo-sensei, indicating that I'll be up to it. He seems satisfied, smiling and stepping backwards to give me room to stand up. Just take it easy today. We can start getting down to some proper work next time. He turns away, heading across to talk to a group of students, leaving me to internally thank him for being so understanding. It's awkward to just stand up and leave the room in the middle of free practice, but at least this time I've been granted permission. As I enter the quiet of the hallway, the sounds of the other musicians muffled by the walls, I make my way hesitantly towards the door of the other room. This feels very wrong in a number of ways, and I definitely don't feel confident about it at all. I just hope she can forgive me for yesterday. The sound of the flute catches my ear again. She's practicing the same piece as before. Realizing that I should probably announce my presence before I go strutting in there this time, I raise my hand and knock timidly on the door. She might not have said anything in response, but she definitely heard that. Taking a large breath, I open the door. The light in the room might be bright, but thanks to its small size and near-empty state, it feels slightly less intimidating. I let the door close behind me, blocking out most of the sounds produced by the other club members. Just me and her. Hi, it's me. She continues to look in my direction, bewildered. From yesterday. The slight shift in her expression suggests she knows what I'm talking about, but her body stays just as rigid as mine. I take a proper glance at her. Her eyeline meets my chest, not really looking at me, but aware of my general position in the room. That's when the revelation hits me again. She can't see your face, Kakeru. The entire reason for my social anxiety is not applicable to the situation. It's an impossibility. I almost don't believe it. It takes me a moment, but after hammering it into my head a few times, I manage to take a tiny scrap of confidence from the fact and open my mouth to speak again. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Feeling as though I've momentarily turned into a different person, I dare to look her in the eyes for a moment. Her gaze softens a bit. That's okay. The soft sound of her voice is so delicate, I barely hear her. We both stand there for a moment, a tremendous amount of awkwardness hanging in the air between us. It seems as though I'm just about forgiven for my trespassing, though, so I muster the courage to speak again. I joined the club yesterday. Well, it's not entirely true from my perspective. I was kind of forced into coming. She takes a moment to process the information before replying. Do you play the piano? How does she... Oh, of course. She'll have been overhearing the rest of the club's practices for months since their last pianist left. The sudden reappearance of its sound would have given that away. Yeah. She nods. Sorry if I was... She struggles with her words before cutting herself off, inevitably unable to express herself properly. I know exactly how that feels. She looks a little regretful before she manages to speak again. I don't get visitors here. I realize that she's referring to how she looked at me yesterday, knowing now that it was simply a fear of being exposed to a random person and not of my appearance. I don't feel mad at all. No, it was my fault. My admission still doesn't alter the guilt on her face, and it makes me feel bad for her. Thinking about our similarities, I force myself to keep talking, trying to demonstrate some common ground. Actually, I'm kind of jealous that you practice in here. I don't like crowds. I haven't spoken this much in years. It makes me feel a little dizzy. After reverting my eyes to steady myself, I look up again. She clasps her hands around her flute, looking thoughtful. Me neither. I feel as though I don't like crowds is a bit of an understatement, so I awkwardly try to explain myself a little further, although it's not exactly nice to talk about. I try to avoid people. They make me nervous. God, I sound like such a baby. Looking away again, my eyes wander to the back wall of the room. There's another piano in here, although this one is brown and looks a bit older. Leaning against the side of it, I spot what must be the girl's cane, the long stick that helps her with navigation. Things must be very difficult for her. It takes me a second to realize that the tiny noise she just emitted was actually a very timid laugh. When I look at her, she seems to have relaxed a little, smiling ever so slightly. Aw, she's pretty. I'm the same. I feel my own breath rush out of me in something resembling relief, and the feeling is utterly odd to me. How am I this calm right now? Does the fact that she can't see what I'm insecure about really change things this much? Well, I'm not exactly calm, but this is the easiest I've felt around anyone for a long time. It's so unfamiliar that I'm not even sure if I like it or not, as stupid as that sounds. However, it seems as though my admission of my anxiety around people has struck a chord with her. Kudo-sensei was right, we do have similarities. I suddenly realize that I've committed another social blunder. I haven't introduced myself. I'm Akane, by the way. Akane Kakeru. I feel my face begin to flush with heat. I don't think I've said my own name aloud once since I started at this school. She nods in recognition. I'm Fujiwara Haruka. She grips her flute a little tighter again, seeming to be thinking about something. It's not so bad now. We're not really strangers anymore. She blushes slightly as she says that, her face tilting towards the ground, and I feel myself wanting to smile internally at her somewhat innocent, childlike point. No, I guess we're not. The conversation runs dry, and I peek at the clock on the wall, conscious that I must be taking up a lot of Haruka's time, when she could be practicing. I should probably let you play. She glances towards her instrument, almost as though she'd forgotten about it, before nodding in agreement. I reach for the door, pulling it open gently. See you. Despite the fact that she can't see it, I bow my head, probably in one last apology for encroaching on her personal space. Just as I'm stepping through the doorway, the sound of her voice reaches my ears again. I pause, looking back into the room. For a moment, she doesn't speak, and clumsily I realize that she probably isn't sure if I'm still there or not. Yes? It seems like the right move as she relaxes a little at my voice, though fidgets with her flute before continuing. If you wanted to talk again, Her expression grows nervous as she pauses, but after a second she regains her focus. I wouldn't mind. The words catch me off guard. This second encounter has been thoroughly awkward and embarrassing, but amongst it all, there was something that made me feel little being around her is just that little bit less uncomfortable than others. Wow, I read that wrong. There was something that made me feel like being around her is just that little bit less uncomfortable than others. Still unsure of how I feel and what I'm really saying by it, I find myself replying with a single word. Okay. Evenings are always the same. I come home from school, go straight to my room, and do my homework. At some point, one of my parents pops in momentarily to deliver me a plate of whatever's for dinner. It's shameful, but I haven't eaten dinner at the table with them for a long time. Once I'm done eating, I usually give in to the urge to fritter around away the rest of the night playing video games until I go to sleep. I'm about to do just that. Finishing the last of my meal, I set my chopsticks down and recline, feeling full. With nothing to focus on, my mind wanders back to the events of the day. What a strange experience. I'd actually spoken to Haruka of my own volition, and not only that, I'd said full sentences, several of them. If I weren't acutely aware of how full my stomach feels right now, I'd suspect that my body was being possessed by someone who was actually good at talking to people. The whole thing has been weird, but I guess it wasn't horrible. Still nerve-wracking, though. As I'm pondering this, I recall the image of Haruka's cane propped up against the piano. I really can't imagine what it's like to be blind. It's just too confusing, and the more I think about it, the less I seem to be able to wrap my head around it. I remember there being a music stand there too, with her sheet music on it. How on earth does she use that? I realize that music is mainly about sound, so technically there's nothing really stopping her from being good at the flute, which she seems to be. You'd just think that learning pieces would be extra difficult for her. Thinking back to what Kudo-sensei had said when he was telling me about her, I consider her place in the music club. She doesn't join in with group activities. She doesn't seem to play the same pieces as the others do. She just keeps to herself in that little room, doing whatever she likes, I guess. Kudo-sensei had given me the impression that she'd been allowed this freedom because of her anxiety around people. I guess she can't stand playing music with the others. Hey, ditto. It's quite sad to think about it that way, though. It's as if she's just been tucked away in the back room and forgotten about, seemingly incapable of doing anything of real value by anyone. As this thought runs through my mind, another one joins it, something that Kudo-sensei had said multiple times. I bet you two would have a lot in common. Now that I'm considering Haruka this way, that suggestion doesn't seem so great. Is that why he practically sent me to go talk to her? Because he knows I'm going to be useless to the group? I sigh audibly, trying to shake off the notion. That's probably not the intention behind it. Also, that whole train of thought was rude on Haruka's part. My shoulders sag a little in guilt. Trying not to go down that rabbit hole, I try to consider Haruka herself. She must get something positive from being in the music club, otherwise she wouldn't do it. I have to admit, I'm just the tiniest bit curious. I feel like if I were in her position, I'd just feel like crap all the time, hearing everyone practice from another room and knowing that I didn't belong with them. She must have a different perspective. Casting my mind back one more time, I remember the last thing that Haruka had said to me before I had left the room, reminding me that I do, in fact, have a way of finding out how she sees things. If you wanted to talk again, I wouldn't mind. Does that mean I'm actually going to go back to the music club for a third time? I must be mad. Well, I suppose they do say it, don't they? Third time's the charm. Okay. It's a little bit early, but my voice is really struggling here. And besides, I think that that's a great stopping point for now. So, I don't know if I'm going to be continuing this on Friday. I assume so. This is so far a really, really strong VN. I like it a lot. I obviously have to do a lot of talking, but that's perfectly okay. Wow, I'm really interested to see what happens next. This is a really profound VN, so yeah. That's going to do it for today. Now I need to rest my voice until the next stream, so game really isn't for you? That's okay, it's not for everyone. Every game isn't for everyone, so anyway, I'll be back Friday, hopefully to continue playing this, and I hope to see you all then. Until then, on behalf of East Asia Soft, I have been Skull. Have yourselves a great day and a great week. Thanks for joining Dim and Panda and everyone else in the chat, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!